Welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing, an inside look at the many facets of work that is happening at the Department of Children and Families, between our staff, the families we serve, and our community partners. My name is Jaqueline Ford. I have had the honor of working for the department for almost 30 years. And although I may be familiar with many of the topics we bring to you, I have invited experts in those fields to help us dispel the myths and misconceptions that can often be barriers to our work. Join us as we open our doors and invite you to have a seat at our table. Ken, thanks so much for being on the set of Doors to Hope and Healing. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Jackie.
You're an old friend of mine, and you've been on the show before.
I have.
Many years ago, and I think since the last time you were on the show, your position with our department has changed. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for the department?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jackie. And first of all, you do a wonderful job month after month with the show. Always a pleasure to come on. So I think the last time I was here, I was actually in the position of Director of the Office of the Ombudsman. So since that period of time, I'm very thankful I was promoted to Chief Administrator for External Affairs. And so I oversee our department's communications, community relations work, and as we're going to talk about later on today, our prevention framework. So really the external facing components of our department, I oversee with, really some great people that work under me. We have a wonderful team, and very grateful that 35 years after beginning my career, I am here still promoting the great work that the department does. So excited to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, and it's a pleasure to work under your
There we go.
leadership.
How long has it been now? It's been
On and off.
5.5 years plus 3 previously, so about 8 or 9.
Yeah, I think probably I've been here for 31 years, so a good portion of it has been under
Absolutely.
your leadership, so I appreciate that.
You got it.
So let's start with our leadership at the department. So, our department has a new commissioner, Commissioner Jody Lilly, who's leading us. Can you tell us about her?
Yeah. First of all, I think it'd be wonderful to have the commissioner on so the viewers can see her and hear directly from her about her journey to becoming the leader of our department. So Commissioner Lilly is a 36-plus year veteran of DCF. She will say that she started her career knocking on doors as an investigator in New Haven during what many of us remember was the height of the crack epidemic, when drug use was criminalized and our systems and our society looked a lot differently than it does today in response to abuse or neglect. And from there, she became a supervisor. I knew her because we worked briefly together both in the New Haven office, and then she went on to become a trainer at our Academy for Workforce Development, and then years later became the director. And for almost 2 decades, she led our academy that trains new workers, the ongoing staff, runs the mentoring program, leadership, skill building. So she's really had quite a career. And what's unique about her as well is she has the internal knowledge of DCF, because after her work at the Academy, she became Deputy Commissioner of Administration for 5 years under Commissioner Durantis. But she's got the internal, but also the external. She's nationally known for her work in racial justice. She's been a consultant to, I think, 13 different jurisdictions, doing some really incredible work on a national level. And what she's been able to do is bring in her current and decades-long experience with DCF, and then pulling in that national experience in the leadership positions that she's held into her role as commissioner to really enhance so many different operations of our department. And she was appointed by the governor. I think our first day was February 2nd, 2024. And here she is.
Here she is. Well, it would be an honor to have her on our show and to introduce her to our viewers.
Absolutely.
So that's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Tell us about the 5 priorities of the work that the commissioner established when she first took office in February.
Sure. So one of her main messages really was that she wanted to enhance a number of areas in our work that, not because they were problematic, but because she really felt we could take them to a higher level in response to the needs that are happening in today's communities. So the first 2 priorities she has is really enhancing the safety practice and service provision for both the 0 to 5 population and transitional age youth. So those most youngest in our communities, kids 0 to 5, who tend not to be visible, who cannot protect themselves, who can't call 911 or run away, or maybe not even recognize what's happening to them or wrong. We know that this group, the 0 to 5 population, are the highest risk across Connecticut and across the country for child maltreatment, especially that 0 to 1 age group. So what does one do? We're looking at different ways of supervision when we have a child that young in our caseload. Do we need more intensive services? Do we want to flip some of the services we have to put a greater focus on the needs of these families, maybe versus other families, depending on what our data and our reports tell us? She's also brought in a director of child safety practice and outcomes, Jaqueline Ford, to put a greater focus on this group. So the youngest in our system is a real focus of Commissioner Hill-Lilly in this administration, as is those kids that we call transitional age youth, right? The TAY youth, who tend to be 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, up through those age groups, who are with us, who are transitioning into young adulthood. Do they have the skills to live independently? Do they have the proper educational support set up so they can complete high school and now go on to post-secondary education? We have youth going to schools across the country that are still supported by DCF, which is great, but we can do better. How do we collaborate for this age group along with our partners at the Department of Developmental Services and the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services? So if our youth cross into those systems as well, what's the best service provision and support this group needs? Along those lines, what the Commissioner also is doing is really refining our framework for children's behavioral health. When the viewers think of the Department of Children and Families, predominantly you think what? Child abuse and neglect. Well, we are also the lead children's behavioral health agency for the state. We provide a provision of services in-home, in our communities, behind the scenes funding and structuring programs so kids' behavioral health needs are met across Connecticut. And so in order to enhance that work, one of the structural changes the Commissioner did is she moved behavioral health under now Dr. Nicole Taylor, who used to be our medical director, who's now chief administrator for behavioral health and well-being. So Dr. Taylor has under her not just the medical aspects of the children in our care and custody in the communities, but also now the behavioral health. So the real continuum of well-being that kids need. The last two priorities focus on deepening community partnerships. We don't do this work alone. Right? One of my favorite quotes is, we're the Child Protective Services Agency, we're not the Child Protective Services System. So how do we develop greater relationships amongst everybody in our communities to protect children? And then lastly, we know how difficult this work is. The things our staff see every day, the vicarious trauma that they experience. So the Commissioner is really big on wellness and supports for our staff across all divisions. So those are her 5 priorities that she established when she first took office.
Wow. Well, those are very impressive. And, being one of those direct line workers, under her administration, you could already see the changes and feel the differences for sure.
I agree. I think, first of all, she's really helped us acknowledge that it is okay to say, I need a little help here. I'm going to call our employee assistance program. I'm going to lean on my supervisor and manager after a traumatic incident on a case, not just for a child fatality, but maybe for a placement that went terribly wrong. Maybe a child on your caseload has suffered the death of a parent. This work is incredibly complex. The needs that we are seeing today in our communities far outweigh anything we've seen before previously. And we've acknowledged that, and the Commissioner is very intent to make sure that we as a staff are okay, because when we are okay and when we are strong, we can be strong and we can be okay for the children and families that we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. Traditionally, the department had 5 strategic focus areas, and now we have a 6th that was added. Can you speak to us about what that 6th new
point is.
Sure. So the strategic focus areas have been safety, permanency, well-being, racial justice, and in our workforce. And now we've added prevention. So what does that mean? What that means is we believe that when we do prevention right, we as an agency, we as a state can establish supports upstream. So when stressors arise in a family, they have the supports that they need locally, so that stressors, that circumstance doesn't build, which then unfortunately may result in an act of child maltreatment. So then you're coming to our attention because a child was harmed versus coming to the community's attention because you need support at a much lower level, right? So saying that a different way, when, we receive about 70,000 new reports of child abuse and neglect a year, 70,000. Not all of those meet our statutory criteria to commence an investigation, but community members are saying, look here. But yet when you look at the family, if you talk to them and you trace back, hey, when did the issues in your family start? When did you notice maybe you needed something else? It was months, years beforehand. So if services were set up now to address the issues as they were emerging, what we think is less families would have to come to our attention, and families wouldn't go deeper into existing systems where they are because they're getting what they need in a more timely basis. So prevention is now that sixth strategic focus area. Commissioners asked that I develop, along with my colleagues, and implement a prevention framework, that part of which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's really an exciting time because we're moving from being a reactionary department to getting well above a problem before it needs to come to our attention.
And the collaborated efforts with all of the, I like when you said, we're not the whole system, we're just the agency.
Exactly. And part of that work too is, and again, I hope when the viewers hear this, it generates some ideas on their end. Who do we need to partner with to truly develop a prevention framework? How about religious-based organizations, parent-teacher organizations, grassroots? We have millions of dollars of funding that we put out to community programs and contracted providers, but who knows our families the best? Sometimes it's just those organizations that don't receive any state funding, but are there because they're entrenched in the communities. How do we know and understand them? And how can we as a state support them, giving the needs that they see on a local level? Because we know all of our communities have different needs. We had a meeting today with our statewide advisory council, and one member put it very, very well. What happens in an inner city is different than what's happening in a rural community. And how do you adjust, and pivot accordingly?
Having been here for so many years, a lot of times, many years ago, we used all of those partners to help us build our foster care base. And we would go to those parent-teacher organizations or those other organizations you mentioned and see how we could find more foster and adoptive parents. But beyond that, the prevention work and the way that we can work together for the same family that we're both seeing and we're both dealing with, and to work collaboratively in that, with that angle makes perfect sense.
And at the end of the day, what do we want this to look like? Well, let's be honest. When prevention works, the calls to the Department of Children and Families will decrease. The footprint of the Department of Children and Families will be less in our communities, and we will be shrinking as an agency because more is happening in the communities to prevent families from needing to come to our attention, because that means less kids are being harmed. So in essence, we're trying to put ourselves out of a job.
Out of business.
Out of business. But again, we always are cautious to say, if you believe a child is subject to maltreatment, you call us, period. But so many times people will say, I didn't think they were being harmed. I didn't know who else to call, so I'm calling you. The systems, when set up, we can now say to people, call here, call here, call here, and they will have confidence and familiarity with those supports.
So the calls will just be very different.
And I think the calls that do come to us will be clear-cut, child maltreatment, everything else will be embedded in the community. Absolutely.
As well as our families won't be as frightened to make the call themselves to seek that support.
Right. You know, one of the pieces I love about my job, and like I said earlier, I have a lot of the public facing responsibilities, is I go many places with Commissioner Hill, Lilly, and others, and families will say, you know, I'm worried about my brother. What do I do? I'm worried about my niece. Who do I call? And when you can say to people, here's 211, here's this line, here's that, it's like this, you see them relieved, okay, I know where to go. So a large part of the prevention work is helping people understand what is out there already, and then building upon that depending on the need and the unique stressors in our local communities.
Yeah, and how to access it. Which,
Exactly.
You know, to us, because we understand and we've been embedded, other people don't understand it.
We live in the system, others don't. We have to understand that.
Right, absolutely.
Well stated, yeah.
What are the issues that the department is now seeing that you would say is negatively impacting children and families?
Yeah, boy, I would say there's three big ones. First of all, it's substance misuse. I think all of us are aware of the carnage and the trauma that fentanyl has left on our families and our communities. And I'm cautious to say substance misuse because substance use in and of itself may not be a reason to contact our department. It's when an individual's use of substances impacts their ability to properly care for their child, up to and including keeping their child safe. And I want to be sensitive to that we know there are millions of people across our country, hundreds of thousands here in Connecticut, that may be suffering from a substance use disorder. There are significant programs to help those individuals. What we're looking at is when that use now results in a child not going to school, being exposed to their parents' use, so they are in a dangerous situation, not having proper supervision, up to and including, you know, being left home alone, living in dangerous, unsanitary, unstably housed places. So substance misuse of illegal substances and even legal substances is a major impact on our families. And last time I checked, upwards of 70% of the reports we receive have some component of substance misuse allegations in them. We also know that domestic violence, or as we call it, interpersonal violence, is another significant factor that negatively impacts our families that may lead to child safety. Caregivers in physical altercations in front of the kids, household members acting violently towards each other. What we're also seeing is a lot of oppression and coercion on the batterer's part towards a survivor of domestic violence that doesn't even relate to them being physically harmed, but their movements, who they talk to, their desires, what they want to do on a daily basis are being controlled. So when we get involved in a situation where domestic violence or intimate personal violence is being alleged, our job is to ensure the children's protection, first and foremost, while also empowering and supporting the individual who's been harmed so they can be safe while they are keeping their children safe, while the individual that's doing the harm has the proper supports. So again, I think there's some perceptions that in interpersonal violence, we are quick to remove children. That's absolutely not the case. Last, I would say major risk factor is when we encounter a caretaker who has untreated mental health issues, whereby because of that illness, their judgment is dramatically impaired. They, again, are not able to meet their child's needs up to and including keeping their child safe. And again, we are sensitive that there are millions of people that have a mental health diagnosis. Okay. It's when the behaviors of the caretaker negatively impact the child, regardless of the origin, that's a child maltreatment issue. So those three issues we are seeing as the highest factors that impact child safety across Connecticut.
So Ken, if one of our viewers is watching now and they have a concern about a family, who would they call and what can they expect once they make that call?
Sure. So if you're concerned about child maltreatment, we want you to call 1-800-842-2288. 1-800-842-2288. That's the Child Abuse and Neglect Care Line. They're open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and callers can remain anonymous. What's most important is that you get the information to us, you tell us your concerns, we're gonna have a conversation with you over the phone, and if the information meets our statutory criteria, which statutorily allows us to commence an investigation, we're going to go talk to the parents and all household members. We're going to talk to the children, hopefully alone and apart from the parent. With the parent's permission, we're going to talk to doctors and schools and any other providers that the family may be involved in to understand, are these children safe? And are there any conditions that are negatively impacting the child's safety and well-being? And if there are, the immediate response isn't removal. It's, okay, what community services can we plug this family into so the children are safe and the parent is addressing whatever issue it is that came to our attention? I think the perception is, I call DCF and I remove kids. And it's actually the opposite. You know, on any given day, we've got about 3,100 families that are subject to some type of investigation in the state. We've got about 1,800 families that have ongoing work with us because we've identified a problem. And we've got around 3,200 children in our care and custody. That number over the past 5 years really has been decreased by about 25%. Don't worry that when you call us, it's going to result in a child being removed. Think of us as a support and a resource for a child who's in a situation that is or potentially harmful to them. And when you get that to us, we then can plug in an array of services that a lot of other states are envious that Connecticut has to keep that family intact and support them. We believe that children are best served in families, and families are best supported by communities.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. You know, I understand that 85% of the calls that we do receive come from mandated reporters.
Yep.
For our viewers who are watching who don't really understand what a mandated reporter is, can you share that? And there's some new laws around mandated reporting, if you can update us on those as well.
Sure. So a mandated reporter is somebody who in their professional capacity works with children and families. And when they have a reasonable suspicion that child maltreatment has occurred, you by law are obligated to contact us. The laws have changed a little bit. So now as a mandated reporter, if you're not sure of what you have in front of you, if it hasn't met that reasonable suspicion criteria in your mind, you can conduct what we call a preliminary inquiry. You can ask some additional questions to fill in the gaps of information you may not have to get to that point where you say, all right, I do think this is a reasonable suspicion and I'm going to call, or no, I don't think this is a situation where the department should be notified. And the law also says that there's a good faith provision not to make a call. So if you've asked some questions and you say to yourself, I don't believe this is child maltreatment or a reasonable suspicion of, then you're covered by law for making those good faith efforts. So that's important because mandated reporters will say, I didn't know what else to do. I didn't think it was abuse and neglect, but I didn't know who else to call. Now we're saying if you don't think it's abuse and neglect, don't call us, but you also have the opportunity to ask some additional questions as well.
To be more comfortable.
To be more comfortable.
Yeah, to make that decision. I know that the mandated reporter training has been enhanced, and we have with more supports, and we have a roadmap that has been implemented. Can you talk with us about what the intention of the roadmap is? Yeah,
we're really proud of this. I'm smiling because my staff and I worked really hard along with our commissioner and executive team to say to our mandated reporter community, but also anybody who takes a look at this, all right, if you don't know where to go to refer a family for support, here's where you go. So the roadmap walks you through, hey, do you think first about family and natural supports that could maybe come in and help that family? Describes who Favor is, our parent organization run by parents and youth with lived expertise to do advocacy work for families involved in a particular system. Talks about juvenile review boards and our youth service bureaus who act as diversionary groups right in local communities to support families, but also keep youth out of the juvenile justice system. The roadmap also takes a look and provides information on the substance use access line, a fabulous resource. It's an 800 number you can call. Right on the phone, they will tell you where there's an opening for a substance use resource, up to and including arranging transportation for you to get there. I've known a number of people that have used it, and it's tremendous. We also talk about 211. You know, 211 is the place to go where you can receive help for emergency housing, referrals for childcare, income. It's also, 211 also has connected to it the 988 suicide advisory hotline. For somebody who is exhibiting suicidal ideation and thoughts, call 211, call 988. We also have links to the wearect.org website and connecting to care.ct.org. Great databases of information to help families navigate through what supports are available for them right in their local communities. Another part of our roadmap, so to speak, is explaining what our partners do at Carillon Behavioral Health. They have an incredible array of supports for families, up to and including intensive care coordination, in-home evidence-based programs to deal with substance use, parenting skills, untreated mental health. And towards the end, it explains a little bit about voluntary care management. So if there is a family who has a child that has significant behavioral health needs that may require some non-traditional supports, up to possibly even needing placement out of the home, you can contact the voluntary care management program. You're not calling DCF, you're calling the voluntary care management program to get connected to our partners at Carillon Behavioral Health. Meaning you're gonna call a DCF number, all we do is take down your information and make a quick assessment, and we refer the case practice out. And then lastly on that roadmap, we talk about our urgent crisis centers, which literally are walk-in centers and clinics for children who are experiencing a behavioral health crisis, just like you walk into urgent care when you're sick or you think your arm is broken. Here you can bring your child who's experiencing a behavioral health crisis to be assessed right there, to divert having to go to the emergency department. And I know I said that incredibly fast, and I think we're going to hopefully put the visual up on the roadmap. But the key piece here is we're giving our community members across Connecticut options of where to go to refer and connect a family if they think a family needs something, but they just don't know where to find it. But again, if you're ever concerned about child maltreatment, call that care line number. You can also refer a family to one of these supports. If you don't think it's child maltreatment, here's your roadmap. And the roadmap talks about seeking support is a sign of strength. One of the pieces that we're also pushing very hard at the department is to help everybody understand, like, we got to lift the stigma that's associated with what's asking for help. At some point in our lives, all of us and all of our families have needed something. So let's just acknowledge seeking support is a sign of strength, and here are places you can go in the community.
Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Jackie.
Back again.
Let's do it
another
again.
time. Yes. Thank you for watching Doors to Hope and Healing. If you're interested in learning more about our foster care and adoption program, you can call 1-888-KID-HERO. And again, thank you for watching.
Nick Augustino right here at the East Side Restaurant. We always have the complete full dinner menu. Knockwurst, bratwurst, sauerbraten, potato pancakes, red cabbage, rice pudding, cream pies, all the desserts that Germany had to offer. I always do something different. Yes, I do. I brought seafood to the beer garden at the East Side Restaurant. East Side Restaurant, your German destination restaurant in Connecticut. Tiki-taka, hoy, hoy, hoy!